it's time to address the last few stragglers still hanging unfulfilled from 2022, like a disappointed baby on a corpse's tit. High on Life, a comedy sci-fi first-person shooter by Justin Roiland, creator of the popular show Rick and Morty, as well as such timeless comedy characters as Rick and Morty, and to which he has brought his full repertoire of hilarious voices, including Rick and the other one. So is High on Life funny? That will entirely depend on how tiresome you find the Rick and Morty "we don't give a shit, come and look at us not giving a shit, not that we give a shit if you do" sort of vibe, where characters keep lengthily explaining what they're currently doing like an improv comedian stalling until the ambulance arrives to sew their knob back on. But the odd thing is, it works for me. Yes, I've unloaded dump trucks of lukewarm shit onto games like Borderlands that think all you have to do to be funny is talk like a socially awkward person binging on cocaine in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer writer's room. You people, Yahtzee, did you play Signalis? Yahtzee, have you heard of Pentiment? Yahtzee, are you aware of the concept of video games? Yes, I'm somewhat cognizant of video games. Many I haven't reviewed because what ends up getting the zero punctuation treatment is decided by a highly complex algorithm, a very small part of which is affected by commenters dribbling in my ear like a watering can trying to fill a sinkhole. 2022 probably set a record for most number of games people kept vocally recommending at me, usually on the basis that they're like other games what I like, which is flawed logic. Oh Yahtzee, you like masturbation. Have you tried taking a sausage roll out of its casing over and over again? For crikey, could nobody shut the fuck up about this one? Probably because it's like Silent Hill 2, and liking Silent Hill 2 is the closest thing I have to religion. But Signalis isn't merely influenced by Silent Hill 2, it feels more like the result of someone having played nothing but Silent Hill 2 for 10 years and assuming that's just how you make games. It was providing the cozy light sim experience I wanted until about the 2/3 mark when I realised that since furniture has different stats and there's no real shortage of materials, optimal play is to just furnish every single room with the same shit. And I wanted to play a game about a bear who makes pancakes, not one who has to single-handedly construct a chain of budget motels where the staff spend 3 hours every morning cleaning out the suicide victims. Oh god, games industry, would it kill you to show a little originality now and again? I'm so sick of playing game after game about journeyman artists in 16th century Bavaria. Why don't you ever make games about being a soldier in World War II? Or a space marine with so many LEDs on their armoured pyjamas they look like an alarm going off in a Christmas tree shop? The town and Abbey are just jam-packed with fully realised characters from all walks of life, all with relationships with each other and unique secrets and situations, and thy dialogue cup need never run dry, but there are so many characters it's hard to keep track of them all in my head. If you click on someone's name, the game helpfully shows you a picture of them, which is of somewhat limited usefulness. I mean, with the traditional medieval costumes, 90% of the game's female characters resemble some breed of slightly harassed-looking penguin. In the third act, you play as an adult version of one of the children from the previous act, and I could barely remember who the fuck she was. Didn't seem worth committing all those little gremlins to memory after the first time jump happened and half of them died of the plague. Pentiment is one of those games that would be tagged on some hypothetical digital distribution service as choices matter. And as is becoming the running gag with such things, your choices do not matter for platypus poo. They make a big show of having you pick Andreas's background and skill sets from multiple options like you're picking your class in an RPG. But all that results of you rolling him as, say, a hedonist educated in Paris is that you get a couple of extra dialogue lines here and there, mentioning how he once brought himself off on the wall of Notre Dame Cathedral. None of the actually significant plot events change at all. Even the choices around which the entire game revolves, picking who to pin the murders on, don't matter and don't change much except some later dialogue and who no longer has a stocking over the fireplace at Christmas. And the reason why it doesn't matter is that it's doing that Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 thing again, where you pick one of the suspects who all equally plausibly could have done it, and then the game goes, oh, you think that's what happened, do you? Interesting theory. Anyway, moving on. What? Aren't you going to tell me if I guessed right? Print the answer upside down at the bottom of the page like Slylock Fox? Here's my advice. Go into Pentiment expecting a nice, densely written slice-of-life drama about 16th century European religious politics from the perspective of ordinary people. Then when you're finished, put a bucket on your head so that you never play it again or discuss it with anyone else. Then you can craft a wonderful delusion in your mind that your choices were actually really important, and if you'd taken a different route, Andreas would have ended up moving to Gran Canaria and turning into a herring. It's a curious pattern emerging in my list of favourite games, in that many of them in some way prominently feature a boat. Think about it. Return of the Obra Dinn, Spiritfarer, Silent Hill 2 has that one bit where James Sunderland goes to a boating lake on World's Most Attentive Husbands Get In Free Day. Dark Souls, has a couple of swords that could conceivably be repurposed as a mizzen mast, and look at all the other clues. He likes Horatio Hornblower books, he owns a bath, he's physically dependent on water to continue living. Clearly we have stumbled upon the secret cheat code that will ensure a positive review from Yahtzee Croshaw. Well, I had to get to the bottom of this. I'd hate to think any aspect of my behaviour had become in any way reliable. If my wife found out, she'd make me start unloading the dishwasher again. Sailing Era is a Chinese game, which come across not dissimilarly to Japanese games, except the characters have this hint of desperate panic in their eyes because they're afraid of being disappeared by the government. Besides that, the main hint hint that gave it away was that the fucking thing was in Chinese by default, and I had to go bushwhacking through the menus trying to educated guess my way to the language option, which might as well kick off my first criticism. It's localized about as well as an American tourist in the Arctic Circle. The dialogue's all badly framed in the rest of the interface, with occasional missing spaces and line breaks in the middle of words, and generally reads like it got roughed up in an alleyway by Google Translate. But as well as ship combat, there's also hand-to-hand combat when you board each other, ostensibly. I mean, I'm pretty sure there is. It happened in a tutorial, and that was the last time I saw it. It's entirely possible I was hallucinating from dodgy grog. Couldn't for the life of me figure out how to make it happen after that. Should probably have paid more attention to the tutorial text, I suppose, but with the localization issues, that was like trying to ask directions from a dishevelled person on a street corner screaming about the government listening devices in his urethra. As for the theory that I automatically like games about boats, I'd call this an inconclusive test, because ultimately Sailing Era scratched that itch about as well as rearranging nautical-themed fridge magnets in a rainstorm. Boy, Square Enix have been killing it these last few years, haven't they? And by it, I mean any desire anyone might have to play their shitty fucking games. And by Christ, have they come out swinging this year. You know how hangry means hungry and angry? There needs to be a word that means bored and angry. And hungry. Because that's what Forspoken brings out in me. Hangron-wee, perhaps. The first we see of her, she's in court for stealing a bunch of cash, but she insists she needed it for a good cause, so I was waiting for it to turn out she was single-handedly keeping the orphanage afloat or something, but then it turned out the good cause she was talking about was having a big bag of money in my house, which she then loses for stupid reasons, so she can spend the next half hour sulking around New York, whining about how she wants to be somewhere else where she can be special, possibly with a craftable equipment system. I wonder if I feel differently about all this if I hadn't known from the cover and various other things where it was all leading. If I was watching a Ken Loach movie about poverty in a Sheffield council estate that switched gears an hour in when someone in a hoodie and knockoff Converses gets teleported to Narnia and holds up Aslan with a switchblade. But don't think just because Frey's moved on from whining about wanting to leave to whining about getting back to the place she was whining about wanting to leave means the pace is kicking up. Oh no, you're dancing to Forspoken's tune now, motherfucker. No, after a cutscene you cannot have control back until you've stood there fully contemplating events for long enough for drool to start beading at the edge of Frey's mouth. And sometimes not even then, because sometimes the moment when we think we've finally escaped from the sassy cutscene dialogue and the rolling meadows of the open world splay out temptingly before us like a freshly sculpted pubic thatch is the perfect time to nail our feet to the floor for a forced dialogue tree with the overgrown smartwatch that is Frey's primary support NPC. Apparently someone thought more world building was needed, and this was the gap under the fingernail where the crowbar would fit. But since the game very obligingly provided traversal powers too fast for anything to catch, I decided to speed through the critical path, ignoring every optional activity, all the while going, do it game, give me a mandatory fight that's too hard if I'm underleveled. I know you won't, you fucking coward. And it didn't. More like 4 chokes on. What exactly it chokes on I leave as an exercise for the reader, but probably safe to assume it's something rude. I am absolutely speaking without hyperbole when I say that fuck shit cunt represents everything that is wrong with gameplay design and story writing in high-level game development today. And if you buy it, then you represent everything that's wrong with human genetics today. Okay, that was hyperbole. I'm sure eventually one of these days I'll run into a rhythm action game I don't get on with. It's bound to happen if the genre keeps gaining popularity, when someone makes a game about catching falling turds in a bucket in time with Peter and the Wolf or something, but it's not happened yet, because Hi-Fi Rush is great fun. For some reason, most of the characters are named after, bear with me on this, foodstuffs with slightly hipstery associations. Swiftly, they also team up with macaron, quinoa, almond milk, and organic fair trade coffee beans. I made up 3 of those. Every single thing that animates does so to the beat, so if you lose your rhythm, you can get back in sync just by glancing at some robot cats fucking on a nearby dumpster. But without a decent ranged attack, what if we need to close distance in a hurry? Why, just use the grappling hook, of course. Oh, Hi-Fi Rush, you cunning sod, my one weakness. I'd have defected to the Nazi party if they'd let me use a grappling hook to climb the concentration camp guard towers. Oh boy, I should have kept that to myself. All in all, strong recommend, but at the same time it makes me angry. Big publishers like Bethesda have been trying to convince us for the last decade or so that no, you don't want breezy innovative fun that wraps up nicely in an 8-hour package. You want to swing a pickaxe in the grind mines for months on end, make numbers increment while overworked graphic artists juice the latest hardware directly into your eyes with a ballistic milking machine. But when they throw out something like this with zero hype, it yodels to me that they've known what we really wanted all along. They know damn well what a fucking good game looks like. How timely that they should remember, just as a bunch of live services are getting lined up next to the conspicuously pungent trench, and the whole live service concept is becoming about as radioactive to marketing pitches as coming with a free dead dog. Money talks, eh, Bethesda? Well, maybe yours can't, with your dick stuck in its mouth. First you re-review No Man's Sky, and now this, I hear you cry. What's next, yards? A greatest hits album? A clip show? Well, I feel justified in tackling the remake on multiple fronts. Firstly, the original Dead Space and my review of it was so many whiskey sours ago, I can barely remember either. Secondly, the remake brings enough changes that I found I had sufficient new things to say. And thirdly, the longer I put off of having to do Hogwarts Legacy, the more time I have to shop around for glaziers I can hire after like 9 diametrically opposed internet communities come over and smash all my windows. In brief, shit makes slightly more sense. I mean, it's still rubbing up against the fact that it's the Dead Space universe where every single human authority is either inexplicably corrupt or mad, to a degree beating out even the Alien and Resident Evil canons, but check it, the main female NPC now has a more nuanced personality than insufferable paranoid bitch constantly demanding to speak to the manager. And double check it, Isaac Clarke isn't a silent protagonist anymore, so instead of being a mute idiot who keeps getting volunteered to go touch all the computers in the Monstersoft play area, now he's a try-hard idiot who volunteers to go touch all the computers in the Monstersoft play area. Refer to my review of the original for most of what's worth knowing, pay particular attention to where I say the Ripper weapon is kinda OP, because that's absolutely still the case. I can use one single shot of that thing to keep 2 necromorphs perma-stun locked until they're carved up like the inexpertly assembled turduckens they somewhat resemble. But one significant change is that new weapons are now lying around rather than bought from the shop, a change I support because it meant I didn't have to blow all my savings to try out the beam laser and discover it to be a useless pile of unused IKEA components. Yes, Nick, I promised not to get us demonetized in the first 30 seconds. So, as I'm sure you know, Hogwarts Legacy is based on the work of J.K. Rowling, who is a massive, turfy C-word. As such, reviewing it puts one in an awkward position online, as the feeling in some circles is that even acknowledging it is giving oxygen to her and her horrible C-word opinions. But damn it, I have a job to do, and I feel bad for the no doubt hundreds of ground-level people on the dev team who probably think she's a C-word as much as any of us at this point, so how about this? I'll review the game, strictly on its own merits, but start out by affirming as clearly as possible that I think J.K. Rowling is a... We're past 30 seconds now, right? Does that offset things enough? Oh, of course, you get to pick your house, too. You know how that works. Gryffindor for heroes, Slytherin for villains, Ravenclaw for nerds, and Hufflepuff for the kind of people who tick the little box that says, yes, I would like to receive emails about future promotions. Then you get to school and there's lessons and characters to meet and mini-games and a bit of intrigue, and I was thinking, gosh, this is actually rather jolly so far. I wonder when the other shoe will drop. Then your teacher says, oh, you're new, aren't you? You'd better go and pick up your crafting equipment. And there we fucking go. Yes, there's equipable gear you craft upgrades for. Victorian-era Hogwarts dress code was apparently a bit lax, because after a certain point you show up at class and it's school uniform, school uniform, school uniform, and then you at the end in a jester's outfit and gold lame bathrobe and a traffic cone on your head. And while you're picking up those crafting materials, take a good look at this open world we made. Why not make a start on the collectibles? Did we mention combat as a stealth option? Oh, well that fucking fits, because you snuck this Jiminy Cockthroat bullshit in right under me nose. It's like the moment you first leave Hogwarts, the cardboard facade face plants into the dust and the true colours are revealed. No more jolly hockey sticks on the lawn for you snivelling little teacher's pet bitch. Time to get grinding lest thy numbers not go up. What a startlingly apt statement on the modern education system. Dogshit's Smegmawee starts well, but in the back half turns into the pieces for 3 boring board games jumbled up in a single uninteresting box, and as such I don't recommend. Thank Christ for that. Probably the best possible outcome for me. I can advise against giving it money, even on its own merits, because it is, by the definition laid out in my Gotham Knights review, a game made by as well as being, in a slightly more literal sense, a game made by a Yes, Nick, I'll add bleeps to the YouTube version. Just don't blame me if we give everyone tinnitus. Things have gotten awfully political lately around this silly computer game review show. First we had to take a stance on systemic transphobia because we wanted to play the Twatty Wizard game for Twatty Wizards, and now we're playing a game from Russia, so I guess we have to make clear our stance on the war in Ukraine and Vladimir Putin's saggy man-tits. Well, perhaps not. There are plenty of people in Russia who are just as disappointed by the sagginess of Putin's man-tits as anyone else, and assuming a game has some political bent just because it comes from Russia would be like criticising Tomb Raider for refusing to address the British government's complicity in Irish sectarian violence. So let's crack off with this assuredly completely politics-free review. Atomic Heart is set in an alternative mid-20th century where Russia is the greatest and most powerful country ever and communism rules and capitalism rules, well fucking so much for that, presided over by a charismatic visionary named Andrew of Ryansky or something, who saved Sergei's life on the operating table, and for some reason Sergei has no memory of anything before that. Now if that fact rings several large alarm bells in your head with plot twists stenciled across them, then you're not alone, but the bells seem to be ringing a hell of a lot more quietly for Sergei himself, who is all in on hero worship of this dude, even after the inevitable happens and the robots turn evil and start slaughtering humanity. Sergei meets every slightest suggestion that the dude who created the robots might have to shoulder at least some of the blame, with the foul-mouthed rage of a sailor discovering the true nature of the manatee in his hammock. In Bioshock you electrify water and set fire to oil, and it's situational, requires improvisation. In Atomic Heart, foam enhances electricity, fire, and ice. It's the all-foam-based economy. There's even a bit of dialogue hand-waving why electricity doesn't do anything to water. It's because it's magic Soviet electricity that isn't permitted to mingle with bourgeois liquids by order of the state. Atomic Fart... No, that's beneath me. Ass bum sick tart. It's that peculiar variety of ending Tron 3000 where towards the end the game goes, do you want to fight the final boss and get story closure, or would you prefer to just piss off home now? Forspoken did that, and taking the second option netted you the bad ending, as any good capitalist should expect. In Atomic Shard, pissing off early is how you get the good ending, which makes zero fucking sense to me. The final boss fight is the reward, not the punishment for not wimping out early. Maybe it's another Russia thing? You're supposed to turn around and bugger off home. That's how Hitler fucked up in Stalingrad. You know, I caught some shit a few weeks back for a podcast in which I called Metroid Prime Remastered basically just a visual improvement. How dare ye, cried the Nintendo fans. It's more than that. They completely redid the textures, the models, and the animations. And then we held eye contact for a few seconds as I waited to see if they were going to actually pass the words they had uttered. No, really, it is just a visual spruce up. Fuck you. Alright, fine, they fixed the controls. But what was that? One morning's work? And you can't avoid backtracking, because this was back in the good old days where we didn't have fancy modern luxuries like fast travel. I can't speak for the new players, but I get a strong sense a lot of them will be turned off by a lack of the convenience features we've gotten used to, like permanently highlighted objective markers, or grappling hooks that you get before the 2/3 mark and that can be used in more than like 5 places. No, if you get to the bottom of the phase on mines and realise totally understandably that you haven't the first shoelace shunning clue where to go next, and the Space Pirates didn't invest in much signage, you have to blunder around for 10 minutes before the game will finally heave a sigh and pop an objective marker, always with an air of condescension. Oh, I'm so sorry you couldn't figure out to backtrack out of the entire mine complex and go to the temple in the starting area that's been accessible since you unlocked missiles but is only now relevant. Here, let me take you by the hand and walk you through the map screen so you know exactly where it is. Can you handle it from here, or would you like us to call you a magic carpet? Ooh, Capcom, a remake of one of the most pivotal games of the 2000s and a personal favourite of mine? Go ask your friends at Bloober Team how much you're going to have to do to win me over on this. Want to be one of the first outlets to get a review code? Well, consider your foot in the door. Now let's go down the list. Is the bingo line still in? Yes, it is. The bingo line's still in. Dismantle the pyre. Is the Tetris inventory management still in? Yes. Is the overly enthusiastic Cockney merchant whose presence everyone mysteriously accepts like he's Dr. fucking Who still in? Yes, although slightly more South African these days. That's fine. Is squeaky-voiced midget Napoleon still in? Yes, indeed. What about being chased over a bridge by a giant robot squeaky-voiced midget Napoleon? No, we cut that out. Well, what's the fucking point then? In all seriousness, it would be very mealy-mouthed to spend this review reciting an itemized list of every single set piece that was in the original Resident Evil 4 and that the remake has cut out for one reason or another. So let's do that. The descending ceiling bit's gone, the killdozer bit's gone, the lava castle room's gone, the boss fight with it is gone, and it probably cost a lot of money to license the character from the Addams Family estate. Oh, come on, Yards, you big negative Nathan. Stop focusing on every single fleck of dried-up turd that has been shampooed out of RE4's bum hair, and tell us about what's new with the remake. Well, Leon makes a funny sort of fatty grunt every time he switches to aim mode now, and Ashley grunts all the time as well whenever she has to navigate terrain more complex than a partially occupied waiting room. So if you run up and down the hallway aiming at things, it sounds like you're mixing the English dub for a foreign porno. Not that, Yards. Tell us about those new side quests we were hearing so much about. Oh yeah, I finished an early game area, and as I was leaving I found a blue note scotch taped to the door, saying, hey, why not go through that area again and kill 3 rats? And it took me about 3 hours before I was finally able to get my mouth to stop forming the ooh at the end of fuck you. So I merrily stealth knifed my way through 4 or 5 of the dudes in the starting village assault when suddenly me knife broke. Oh, we forgot to mention your knife has degradation now, said the game. And this time the ooh on the end of fuck you lasted until the beginning of this video. Oh, you want me to cover GDC, do you? You want me to have to traipse back and forth for hours across a crowded show floor looking for one couch out of the thousands visible that it would be socially acceptable to sit on? You want me to leave the house and meet other human beings so that in the future when I inevitably need to urinate all over their games, I have to suppress feelings of shame as well as the usual self-loathing and urge to masturbate? You want me to interact with other people from my peer group in an environment of mutual interest and respect in order to make friends and regain a sense of perspective and self-worth? Christ, you sound just like my wife and my therapist and that mouthy dude at the 7-Eleven. Well, sorry to disappoint, but I have misanthropic shut-in things to do, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to walk out of shot to the left. Oh, fuck. GDC, I feel like you're forgetting about the essential con experience. Members of the press like me being able to flash a badge and walk straight past all the queues, floating a little air biscuit as I go. Well, just so you know, once I finally got in, I went straight to the media lounge and ate 7 complimentary bagels, so I win. Fortunately, San Francisco said, oh, you poor harassed journalists, here's some lovely sunny weather to ease your burden. On the first day. On the second day, it pissed down, so Nick the editor was forced to call an Uber to cross 3 blocks, and I was subsequently forced to call him a great big sook. You're a bipolar city, aren't you, San Francisco? Why'd you say that? Do you want to fight? right. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. I love you. Would you like some homeless person's excrement? Oh, thank you, San Francisco. Because we have two games that represent the two faces of remote island living. On the one side, there's the unspoiled scenery, lovely weather, exotic wildlife, and friendly people. And on the other hand, there's watching your lower half disappear into an oceanic monstrosity that looks like it's midway through eating the entire cutlery section at Bed Bath & Beyond. And then some fat people take some pictures of you from their cruise ship before they swarm all over your island and don't buy any of your grandma's bracelets. Could there be something dark and sinister lurking beneath the oily waters of the archipelago? Well, yes, it's giant fish monsters. Look, there's one over there. Hi guys, I'm a giant fish. Anyone got like a metric ton of ants' eggs? That's kind of how it feels the first time you run into one. The game does a great job of building suspense with the warnings of the spooky townsfolk and the prerequisite Lovecraftian game sanity meter that starts fucking you about after night falls, but when I ran into my first organic dump truck from the fever dreams of Jacques Cousteau, it was just kinda there. It sped around a corner, punched a hole in my hull and went right on going. It was less like being confronted by the horror of the sublime and more like getting cut off by an asshole motorist. How thoughtful of Sega to put out a new Sonic the Hedgehog game on April 1st that can be played in slightly less than the time it takes to watch this video. Plus, it's free, which means I have no right to complain about it. Oh, Sonic the Hedgehog, it's cute that you genuinely believe that, he said as he laced up his favourite curb-stomping boots. They probably rejected the idea of doing a Sonic dating sim for the obvious reason that the fanbase absolutely should not be encouraged in this area. I mean, the other day I was curious to know how rising interest rates had affected the sale price of original Genesis game cartridges, and the results I saw from googling Sonic the Hedgehog inflation will haunt me to my dying days. Oh, and sometimes you have to present a piece of evidence, but never from more than 2 or 3 things, because the game empties your inventory with the regularity of a psychotic anti-hoarding therapist. Always with a different excuse, too. Oh, that piece of paper and stained fingernail clipping were just too heavy for my noodly arms, so I ditched them before I moved on. I threw away the incriminating Polaroid and recently fired pistol with clear fingerprints on the grip because I decided they didn't spark joy. After you pick the correct option, original the character's thought process is represented by a little isometric Sonic level where we must collect a minimum amount of rings to proceed. And anyone who remembers Sonic 3D Blast knows that Sonic and isometric gameplay go together like teabagging and a kitchen waste disposal. A certain light is shed, however, when the end credits roll, and after the actual development team of like 4 dudes has gone past, there's a laundry list of Sega higher-ups who all fingered the pie, including more than one person credited as law consultants. I want to meet the person whose job title is Sonic the Hedgehog Law Consultant and ask them what their mother thinks they do for a living. It's clear now. Mofo of Sofo the Hofo is a game that should have sought forgiveness rather than permission. It fell into the epic Mickey trap, getting us all excited about some mad subversive vision for an established IP, but then decided to run it past that IP's controllers and ran into a bunch of humorless cunts who want to make sure they don't veer from the established style guide, and wouldn't understand irony if you melted down Alanis Morissette and poured her scalding liquid form down their underpants. It was non-canon, guys. This was your chance to have Sonic do something nuts. Turn into a Zojirushi 3-cup rice cooker with detachable vegetable steamer, or get a job as a data validation consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, or star in 2 games in a row that don't suck. Shadows of Doubt is a procedural immersive sim detective game that's in early access because it's trying to balance more moving parts than a waiter at an overcrowded Klingon restaurant, but I'm reviewing it now for 2 reasons. 1, I played fuck all else last week because everything I tried just made me want to go back and play Shadows of Doubt some more instead, and 2, relatedly, I don't think the no early access rule should apply if I'm planning to overall praise the game. The whole reason for the rule was that anything I complain about might get patched out for the final release, but I assume the developers of Shadows of Doubt aren't planning to patch out the good parts that people like. I mean, they're not Activision Blizzard. Oh! Between murders, you balance your handcuff budget by taking side gigs, which usually also involve tracking someone down from very few details, and sometimes you have to use some creative thinking. One time all I had was a phone number and a blood type. So I called the number till it was answered with, "Hello, Zebedee here," or whatever it was, hung up, broke into the basement of the building I was in, hacked the phone records, determined what building the outgoing call went to, went back to the address book and made a list of everyone living in that building whose first initial was Z, ended up with 2 results, went and knocked on both doors and beat the snot out of whoever answered, and I went away feeling jolly pleased with myself. And if there's any area I'd recommend the developers give particular attention to in the course of polishing the game, it's NPC interactions. "Oh my god, I think there's someone in my house," declared one homeowner, alert flashing over their head to indicate awareness of my presence. Said individual was at the time handcuffed and kneeling on the kitchen floor while I searched all his cabinets, having already beaten him to unconsciousness twice. Let's do the usual thing and go down the list of stuff that lasted less time than the development of Dead Island 2, the Second World War, the NASA Moon Expedition, the average life expectancy of a St. Bernard. It's gone through developers like a box of curly-whirlies through dental enamel too. The original devs Techland went off to do Dying Light instead, which was basically just Dead Island with bells on. Then Jaeger had it for a while, the Spec Ops The Line lads, but I guess they had a PTSD flashback at some point and stopped responding to emails. Then it was given to jobbing developer Sumo Digital, the guys who made Crackdown 3, ouch, and finally ended up with Dambuster Studios, who made Homefront The Revolution, double ouch and a stubbed toe. It feels like something that was hastily cobbled together from the work of 15 different studios, one of whom made Homefront The Revolution. It probably didn't help that each of those studios was handed the build and told, "Here's a zombie survival gear crafter that's basically just Dying Light with the bells taken off again, make it interesting, somehow." Oh, and Sam B shows up, you know, from Dead Island 1. one. He's an NPC now. And I reacted with all the excitement I have when I see my dental hygienist at the Safeway. Oh, hello, person I know. Yes, I'm remembering to floss. And then after a fairly pedestrian plot covering all the usual notes, ooh, conspiracy, ooh, military fuck-up, ooh, how many times is the old some asshole hides their bite wound chestnut gonna play out before these safe houses enact a strip search policy? The big baddie turns, for reasons I wasn't entirely clear on, into a final boss monster that's pretty much the same as the last but one boss monster, but they took the gold at the damage sponge contest. While Dead Island 2 is functional, barring one incident when I had to repeat a side quest because I backed off a little too far when the boss monster despawned without giving me back any of the ammo or weapons I'd already used up on him, because fuck me and my heirs, I guess. Star Wars: Dark Forces, then the sequel Star Wars: Dark Forces 2: Jedi Knight, and after that came Star Wars: Dark Forces: Jedi Knight: Jedi Outcast. It was all getting a bit silly. It's hard to maintain a Jedi's monastic dignity when your title's got more colons than an inexpensive Cornish pasty, so perhaps it was for the best to wean ourselves back down to 2. Star Wars: Jedi: Fallen Order, and now the sequel Star Wars: Jedi: Survivor. Yeah, my friends called me the Survivor after we raided that dumpster behind the condemned Indian restaurant. Then he learns of a secret Jedi planet where refugees from the Empire might finally find peace. There's bad Jedis, he has to get the band back together, meekly, weekly, sequely plot. More plot than plot, arf. The bit where he first learns of the secret planet that is what drives the entire story is after about 6 hours of rudderless ricocheting between action set pieces. I struggled to maintain interest because Survivor is another victim of Last of Us 2 or God of War Ragnarok brand excessive padding. Most egregiously in one chapter where Cal gives MacGuffin du jour to one of his nerd friends, and old mate says, I need time to study this. Why not go rescue this hitherto unmentioned dude I know? So you spend 2 hours pissing about in some ruins, find the dude, he dies like a chump, get harassed by a hitherto unmentioned giant robot, destroy it in a painfully weak source action sequence where we just get teleported to all of its weak points in a manner I feel like we could have done at any fucking time, and then when you get back to base, old mate says, right, finished studying now, let's continue the actual plot. And if we'd spent the last 2 hours in our bunk flicking through Wookiee jazz mags, the story would have advanced precisely as much. I'd say the game seems to be lacking attention to detail, but that's not true. It's just reserved its attention for details that don't matter in Ewok's cunt brush. Remember how in the last game most of the secret treasure chests the game suggests we go out of our way to find only contained cosmetics for the lightsaber? And that felt about as rewarding as sanding down a concrete block with your most expensive cheese grater, because your lightsaber is generally as prominent on screen as a lowercase L in Microsoft Word. Survivor doubled down on that. Now, as well as new lightsaber grips and toilet roll tubes, treasure chests contain different booties for your robot pal and fuzzy dice for your blaster, as well as clothing and hair options for Cal. Christ knows why he needed to open a secret chest at the bottom of a lake to figure out how to shave his beard into a porn stash. There is a saying in the creative industries, you are only as good as the last thing you did. And therefore, with the release of Redfall, Arcane, the developers of Dishonored, Deathloop and Prey 2016, are a bunch of incompetent time wasters who have as much business making games as a walrus has assembling a Lego Death Star. You know, I usually regret the fact that my reviews come out after everyone else's, but on occasions like these I can see the advantage, because Arcane were probably hoping that the initial kicking was over, and that they were free to focus on avoiding eye contact with everyone for 6 months or so, until we all forget about this, but no, I haven't forgotten. I will never forget Arcane. Let's look at Redfall. Let's look at what you did. I'd stumble upon hunting parties of 3 or 4 lads, and they'd all die like sleepy chickens in a facility owned by Colonel Sanders. Kind of disappointing to make a big thing of how your game is about fighting vampires, and then have us mostly deal with their gun-toting squashy minions. For one thing, it brings to mind the Order 1886, the video game equivalent of your toilet backing up at the end of a long day at work. But it wasn't long before the first vampire enemy, and the game hyped it up well enough. You go down to a creepy basement, a shadow is cast upon a wall from an upcoming door, a spindly figure hunched over a corpse exuding menace and bestial power. And then it ate 3 shotgun shells and died. I'm sure its claw strikes would have been pretty devastating had I not outwitted them by slowly getting out of the way. The word that defines Red Balls is flimsy. From the narrative to the game design to most of the enemy's skeletons, they're all so badly put together. A game of half-baked combat encounters copy-pasted and stretched out to fill an overlarge sandbox map, like an ill-judged amount of flimsy tinfoil over the leftovers of a meal that nobody particularly liked. Part of me hopes that it was an act of passive aggression on Arcane's part, like someone asked them to make a multiplayer shooter with broader appeal than their usual more experimental stuff, and they plopped this down like a resentful spouse with a burnt dinner. But they were working on this for years. Passive-aggressive feels wholly inadequate to describe someone who could sustain that amount of spite for that long. You'd need a better name for that. Something like My Mum. Well, go on then, Yahtzee, tell us how Tears of the Kingdom is actually bad and we're bad for liking it because you're such a massive contrarian, calm down, YouTube. No, I was not going to say that. I think Tears of the Kingdom holds up to the highest possible standard. Right, and now you're going to say because standard is exactly what it is. Bog standard, grouse, ha ha ha. No, I wasn't going to say that either. You alright, Yards? Look, I'm sorry you find it so difficult to tell when I'm being sincere, but I genuinely think Tears of the Kingdom sets a new, extremely high bar for expansion packs. Aha! Oh, fuck you, viewer, that's what it is. 23 years ago, Majora's Mask seized the opportunity of a direct Zelda sequel to innovate on both the gameplay and narrative level. I'm not gonna get excited just because Nintendo copy-pasted Breath of the Wild and stapled Gary's mod onto the end of it. Breath of the Wild has a phenomenal opening. Wake up in a coffin, go through a cave, get smacked in the face with the entire environment design budget. That's a hook. Inevitably, I thought of it when Tears of the Kingdom started with a fucking walk and talk sequence, where we control a sullen Link being forced to wait for Zelda to slowly mooch through some tunnels as she prattles on about her bullshit, looking like me when the wife makes me come bra shopping. But then Ganondorf gets released and snatches up Zelda, monsters infest the land, Link gets fucked up to the tune of about 37 hearts, you know, an average Hyrule Sunday, and then you wake up in a coffin and go through a cave and etc, and we're back in the Breath of the Wild groove. In fact, it's beat for beat exactly the same groove. First you go around the tutorial island to learn your new powers, glue thing to thing, fuse thing with thing, and teleport through a ceiling. That last one's a bit random and only tentatively gels with the established theme of putting things on top of other things, probably why I kept forgetting I had it, and getting trapped down wells like little Timmy. On the whole, don't take away that I hate the game, for Christ's sake, I just know what you're going to say. Oh, who cares about the story stroke copy-pasted sandbox map stroke everything else you're whittling about when you can craft a flame-spewing helicopter motorbike shaped like Leonard Cohen's left testicle. And in turn I will say what I always say. If the game did have a mind-blowing story and original sandbox map, you would not be saying that it doesn't matter. You didn't learn your lesson when Breath of the Wild came out and you all went, it's perfect, never change a thing. Because now they've improved on it and you're all going, okay, now it's perfect, never change a thing. Spurt? By all means, just don't spurt yourself dry, in case you need a little spurting room for what tomorrow may bring. My little spurting room is under the stairs. Darkest Dungeon 1 was a game people recommended to me a lot. Hey Yahtzee, you like Lovecraftian horror and roguelikes and exploiting people to the point of death-stroke mental breakdown? To which I would say, that's true, but for some reason Darkest Dungeon 1 never really grabbed me. And also hamsters don't talk, so get back in the fucking wheel. Death-saving throws when you're out of health? I'm all in favour. Creates suspense, helps you claw things back from the brink. The same courtesy extended to the AI-controlled enemy. Call me a hypocritical elitist who's prejudiced against the non-sentient, but that I could do without. I brought this fucking boss down to 0 health, and then he polished off my entire battered party in his next 2 turns because he just wouldn't fucking die. And I'm like, game, what the fuck else could I have possibly done to win the day in this scenario? Was I not crossing my fingers hard enough? So you've probably already heard that a game came out that's like the video game equivalent of the Yersinia pestis bacterium. And it's the worst thing ever conceived by the hands of man and will usher in the brown apocalypse that will bury our civilization neath a fecal blizzard. But enough about Redfall. But enough about Atomic Heart. But enough about Forspoken. Blimey, my calendar's filling up. 4 shit apocalypses, gonna have to dry clean the scythe. The Lord of the Rings Gollum is a game about Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is fast becoming the new Star Wars. They won't be happy till every side character and murky period on the timeline has been crowbarred out and used to seed a new potential media empire. Still, pivotal though the character is, there's probably more fruitful places you could have gone to before this. Who looked at the ugly, weak little monster who spent 400 years eating raw fish in a cave before causing a whole bunch of problems and dying in a fire and thought, yeah, this window licker's got a rich backstory worth mining. They'd be a great spokesperson for social distancing in the age of COVID. In the first half of the game, Gollum's psychotic little muttering ass is enslaved in an orc mine, so he and by extension we don't do much more than what the orcs tell him to do, as they spit on him and remind him that he's a minute smear of bird plop on the rear bumper of the universe that's barely worth the effort of cleaning off. In the second half of the game, he gets rescued by elves who treat him nicely and give him food and a lovely place to live, so obviously he spends the whole time being a horrible bastard to them, and trying to escape so he can get back to his busy schedule of sabotaging his own life. As I say, the little shit muncher jumps like an amorous farmhand hearing the henhouse door slam shut, so it's even odds that he'll actually land on the platform you're aiming at, or if you'll get to enjoy once again the unique sound of a leather bag full of broken deck chair parts being hurled into a crevasse. But it's not enough to have us make a decision. We must then go to a little black room and play Dissociative Identity Disorder Debate Club, where we must pick the right options to convince the other personality to go with what we asked to do. Well done, Gollum, you found a way to make binary moral choice slightly more obnoxious. I guess the biscuit can always get soggier, especially when I thought I'd won the debate, but Gollum did the opposite of what I asked anyway, which was either a bug or the game finally fully committing to pissing me about. There was ambition here to be more than just another cynical time filler. Bad as it is, it's not bad in the way that makes it fun to kick around. So don't hate Daedalic Entertainment viewers. Pity Daedalic Entertainment. Pity them for being but a simple innocent creature twisted and malformed by its attempt to cling to a power far beyond its reach. Ooh, I think I feel a games journalism coming on. And as you explore the cramped tunnels by the light of a flashlight that can illuminate as well as 2 glow-in-the-dark Thundercat stickers on a pencil case, you too will be gripped by a sense of visceral horror as you cry, Jesus Christ, frictionally, you're still using the engine from the first game? Those rats all animate like upturned gravy boats on roller skates. What try anything means is what it usually means. You can stack crates, and break open wooden doors. Oh, that reminds me. You're probably conditioned to overlook loose bricks as mere set dressing, but try to unlearn that. Bricks in this game, or as I prefer to call them, master keys, are worth their weight in prime stallion spunk. Fighting games are like 6-year-olds in a playground. They're full of energy and fun to watch, but the moment you try getting your hands on them, everyone beats the shit out of you. The plot is, your custom protagonist is a fighter who wants to be better at fighting. I didn't say it was Shakespeare, but still, fairly universal themes at play. You start off being mentored by Luke, one of the new roster members, who's like Ken and Guile, had an off-the-books bum sex baby, and who gets to be your first training master, because the generic bastard needs at least one distinct quality. The point then is to explore the world doing quests and getting into an extremely medically inadvisable number of fights, meeting the rest of the Street Fighter cast and learning all their special moves too. Exploring the world might be overstating things. The only explorable places are Metro City and this other made-up city with unspecific South Asian vibes, and even then you only get like 5 streets and a fish and chip shop apiece. Every other global location is one sodding room with the relevant fighting trainer standing around checking their phone. I started to suspect the airlines were pulling a fast one with a hastily rearranged soundstage, and all the goodwill I built up rapidly drained away when I reached the final tournament of World Tour's story campaign. In the first round, I was the same level as my opponent, but all my attacks did chip damage and he kept spamming a throw that took 1/3 of my bar per pop. Pop being the sound my neck was making. Still, I got through it by figuring out what special attack countered his throw and spamming that straight back. When I took care of the next few guys with judicious anti-air usage, for a moment I genuinely thought, maybe I could actually get good at this. It's really the same observation and waiting for an opening of Souls-like combat, just with the fast-forward button taped down. But then I got to the final boss, and I won't mince words, he chopped my soft ass up like avocado for the summer salad. By the end of the second round, I was starting to get a feel for his patterns and quietly confident about a rematch, until the game said, oh, by the way, if you fail this, you have to go back to the start of the tournament. What? But I used up all my healing and buffing items getting this far. And relatedly, I wish you'd mentioned beforehand that the final round was a supposed-to-lose fight. Do I get all those items back? No, but you could always eat some of this shit that I found. That's why Diablo 4 has these occasional lookout points where you can press a button to make the camera pan up for a bit and show you a nice vista, as if to say, hey, here's the kind of scenery you could be enjoying all the time if you weren't constantly staring at your knobbing shoes like a scolded schoolboy. Not that there's much to look at very often. Diablo 4 explores every imaginable flavour of washed-out, depopulated hellscape. In fact, it's quite instructive how many ways the location names can rephrase very miserable place. The forlorn tread, the barren steeps, the defiled grove, the anemic falls. Anemic falls? Yeah, my grandma had a lot of those before we fitted the stair lift. So the gameplay of Diablo is usually pretty straightforward. Keep clicking on things till you're at the place where the map icon says to be, and if anything tries to stop you, then click on them to death. Then click around all the random shit you picked up, and if anything's got better stats, you click it into your equip slots, and if not, you click them into a bin. It's like they wanted a gameplay model specifically designed to annoy bats. You play as Archibald Hacker, Esquire, but thankfully you're a full-on cyberpunk future-style hacker in a biker vest and green mohawk, not the contemporary image of a hacker, a pale, sweaty dude ordering too many pizzas to someone's house because they aren't intellectual enough to appreciate Rick and Morty. And another area where I assume Night Dive didn't want to tread upon the creator's perfect original vision is the enemy AI. You see a dude, you duck behind a wall, the dude shoots the wall for a while, then when they pause to calculate how to factor this new wall concept into their worldview, you pop out and shoot them back, and that's basically how every combat encounter goes. Even the bosses are trivial as long as there's at least one solid object to play Ring a Rosie around. Yeah, that's a real superior master race you've made there, Shodan mate. Have you taught them not to shit in the house yet? See, the game has this recurring cyberspace minigame that plays a bit like Descent meets Space Invaders, and is a little out of place, but whatever, it's a break from playing Wall Peekaboo with the mutant cyborgs. But then the whole final boss fight is just an extended session of it while Shodan watches you in sulky silence. And Shodan's main distinguishing trait is her constant articulate mouthing off, calling me a lowly insect, and most of the women I know charge me for that service. Well, invert my nipples and call me a mini golf course if it isn't a Final Fantasy game. Mainline, no less. None of this Crystal Chronicles or Strangers of Paradise twattery. There's a Roman numeral on the end and everything. So who's the iconic hero to be added to the Hall of Legends alongside Cloud, Squall, Lightning, and several others not named after weather patterns? It's Clive! Clive. I don't know how well my reaction will translate here. I know Clive is a less common name in the US and downright exotic in Japan, but in Britain and Australia, it's just a dude's name. It's like calling him Bob or Norman. Well, there's a specific kind of person I associate with the name Clive, the sort of person who talks slowly in a Birmingham accent and corners you in a party to drone on about how he's going to join the army. But when he does, he drops out after 3 days after his mum calls his superior officer and asks them not to shout at him so much. 1 minute it's doing one of the 2 kinds of talky exposition scene, courtroom full of shouting advisors or bedroom pre or post knobbing session with lots of artfully framed nudity. The next there's a giant monster kaiju battle full of yelling explosions and hitherto unrealised final forms, and it's like you're in that season's 1 episode they were saving up the production budget for. It's hard not to feel cynical about it when you finally get far enough in for the broad driving forces of the plot to emerge, and it's basically just go to each of the element-themed crystals and fight a boss, which is about as stock as anime RPG plots get. And of course it ends with using the power of friendship to kill God. Interesting how Clive manages that even though he's fighting by himself. He just uses every pause in the fighting to reiterate how much he likes having friends. Yeah, Clive, that really came across in
in every dialogue scene while you're glaring at them through a haircut like a depressed sea urchin. It just loves sending you on shitty little fetch quests as part of the critical path to pad out the gaps between the production budget episodes, in a way possibly intended to tempt you into side quests. Hey, while we're sending you back to this dreary village to hand someone a bag of spanners or whatever, inevitably with a painfully slow handing over animation, specifically designed to annoy people trying to mash the skip dialogue button, why not click on some green exclamation marks while you're there? The fetching bullshit for twats action need never stop. As Holmes had his Moriarty, as the Beatles had their Rolling Stones, as Kurt Cobain had his own unperforated face, so too does the AAA games industry have its dark reflection. How appropriate that but a week after Final Fantasy went all grim, apocalyptic and sweary on us, that the hot new indie title should be a cozy pixel art game where the stakes can't get any lower because they're currently 10 meters below sea level in the side of a tuna fish. Tuna steaks, you see, that was the pun. So what else does Dave the Diver have to make it stand out? Well, pretty much bloody everything, as in every kind of game that exists in the history of the world. Exploring the deeper and deeper ocean and having boss fights with giant sea monsters is still just the paddling about on the surface of Dave the Diver, with nary a need to roll your trousers up past your knees. Keep digging and there's farming mechanics, environmental puzzles, horse racing, stealth infiltration missions, a curious interlude in which we play a rhythm game at an imaginary Japanese idol concert, and then a final boss that's more of a horizontal shooter than anything else, which is good for people who like variety, I suppose. Probably not so great for anyone who was hoping to make use of all these fish, hookshotting and restaurant management skills that are mainly what we've been training in for the last 15 hours, but let's get back to that. But how's this for an incentive? The top tier of Escapist Patreon subscribers get to vote on what retro game I do a ZP on when summer rolls around, and the AAA release schedule gets patchier than the Wi-Fi in a North Korean gulag. And this time the honour goes to Chrono Trigger, narrowly beating out Danganronpa in the last round of voting. Yeah, sorry weebs. The previous generation of weebs beat you to the punch, but don't let it get you down. Just cope by telling yourself the same thing you say after every American political election. Maybe next year enough old people will have died. If you're used to having your eyeballs physically abused by modern Japanese RPGs with their 20-hour tutorials and interfaces like the modern art on the walls of the euthanasia clinic, it's refreshing how stripped down Chrono Trigger feels in retrospect. Here's your dude, here's a sword, here's 4 different kinds of magic: fire, water, light, dark, and that's your lot. Anyone who says they need more than that is just padding their expense claim. Yeah, I know you heard me, Persona 5. Get out of here with that nuclear shit. That's just fire with a PhD. The traveller travels, as is his wont, to a survivor community in one of Earth's ruined cities and gets the quick induction tour. Hi, welcome, here's the ammo vendor, here's where we hang the tea towels, and here's the interdimensional portal we keep around for some reason. Oh, you think that's impressive? Well, hold my beer. Then 2 of the shelter's residents disappear into the multiverse, and since the traveller has developed a real rapport with the dozy gits in the 20 minutes they've gotten to know them, they immediately travel after them to rescue them from whatever reject Sliders episode they're currently trapped in. Slow down, Yarts, you need to pick a character class first. Do you want to be a gunslinger? Yes. There's actually some other classes as well. I'd assume as much, Remnant, too, but you said something about letting me be a badass dimension-hopping cowboy like the protagonist of a Stephen King pet project, and frankly I'm a little confused as to why you feel the need to continue. You know, my experience with Rembrandt 2 is kind of the inverse of what I had with Rembrandt from the Arses, in that I went in with the positive feeling and gradually soured to it over time. I think the turning point was when I visited the wibbly-wobbly evil purple dimension, and was obliged to explore a very samey desert for hours on end, fighting off endlessly respawning waves of Amazon delivery drones, trying to figure out which of the 11 or 12 interchangeable grindy dungeons I stumbled upon was the one I was supposed to do to progress in the game, and which would just toss me a new amulet that's about as much use for my build as a pamphlet on the negative health effects of showing off awesome quick draw skills. Some with elaborate boss fights that I'd be stuck trying to beat for ages, because such things are usually game design shorthand for go this way, because I gave myself tendinitis modelling this bastard's nipples, so you'd better not miss it. And then afterwards it's all like, haha, it was an optional fight all along. Here's your ring of plus 1.4% pie appreciation back to combing the desert for you. But then the second phase came and killed both me and any interest I had in finishing the game in seconds flat. Some distant twat polished off my whole health bar in 3 bites while I could barely see him through wibbly-wobbly red glitch effects. It was like being beaten to death with a virtual boy. And I was the badass gunslinger, remember? What would the sodding dog handler have done? I don't think there's a command for go straight to the pound and complete your own surrender paperwork. And a lot of people are going, ooh, finally gamers send a clear message that they want good single-player games with strong design and narrative, not just fancy graphics and live service twattery. To which I reply, you mean besides the previous 12 times they sent that message? I mean, Christ, at this point it feels like saying prisoners in basements send clear message that they'd rather not be sodomized with a 6-inch wooden dowel. The world is extremely flexible with letting you make crazy jumps to bypass obstacles, but the pathfinding frequently has trouble keeping up, something I was able to exploit to my favour during one combat sequence where I kept moving to the other side of a huge pit and causing 2 minotaurs to keep getting confused and changing direction like we were chasing a nervous bride around a honeymoon suite coffee table. The winning strategy in such cases was to reload a save and try to cheat as much as possible, which wasn't great for immersion. There was no in-universe reason why Mortimer would drag an explosive barrel into the middle of a group of not yet hostile NPCs. Don't mind me, just thought this would look nice here. My goodness, your leader's making a jolly interesting speech. Why don't you keep paying attention to that while I go over there and check on that thing that's just inside firebolt range? Like this one mission to rescue the druid leader from a goblin camp. I bullshitted my way in and found the dude easily enough, but then he was like, oh, I can't escape with you or consider this quest complete until you kill all 3 goblin leaders. Now, said dude had the ability to turn into a giant bear, which would tip the scales in our favour a tad, but wouldn't come with us at first. Oh, I could come rip shit up, but then you'd lose the opportunity to kill your targets stealthily, he said. Oh, sure, I was totally gonna stealth kill 3 high-level goblin leaders in full view of 9 of their guards and within earshot of 20 more. I'll get right on that. Get in the fucking party bus, Teddy Ruxpin. Something made me keep pressing on. Something always made me want to survive this and see what was around the next corner, and I think that comes down to being a just plain, solidly built game in terms of narrative and discovery. I wanted to keep learning more about my situation and my party members, specifically what they kept inside their underpants. It was vaginas. It also must have taken quite a lot of effort to make a horror game that isn't the slightest bit scary or horrific. Almost impressive, really. The quote-unquote enemies can only attack by aggressively hugging you, and I assume the only reason you're dying from it is because you're a stubborn elderly git who refuses to go to the doctor about his weird heart murmurs because he's afraid they'll stick a finger up his bum. The enemies are also incapable of taking you by surprise because they spend all of their time loudly vocalizing every thought that crosses their minds like a nervous, socially awkward person in a sex dungeon. There's a sinister undercurrent running through it that I don't think got any proper payoff, unless that final boss fight in the basement that didn't have anything to do with the rest of the plot was supposed to be it, in which case, sorry for killing it so fast. Always dampens a surprise party when the honoree walks straight past it to grab his car keys, and then machine guns everyone to death. Do you ever feel the need to go to video games as a whole and say, hey, are you doing alright? Was I the only one who watched the announcement trailer for Mortal Kombat 1 and all the people getting hyper-realistically spread across the landscape like jam on toast and said, do you need to talk to someone, Mortal Kombat 1? Is everything okay at home? Shut up! Don't you understand I have to be real? More realistic gore, always, or they won't take me seriously. I'd say it's the way you just split that dude in half from the nostrils down that makes you hard to take seriously. It's very much a game that refuses to hang around once it's run out of new ideas to throw at you, which I guess is laudable, but I still feel there was more territory for the combat to explore. The super attacks were all kinda lame, and while you can kick people and swing off chandeliers, you can't kick people while swinging off chandeliers, and oh, what an oversight. That was basically Errol Flynn's whole bit. Just that and his apparently grotesquely large penis. I find Blasphemous hard to follow because the entire plot is delivered in dogmatic parables, and instead of health and manner, it's called shit like sin and guilt and fervor, and you pick up shit with names like the Reliquary of the Psychopomp, and then have to go menu exploring to figure out, oh, it's a strength-boosting accessory. Well, why didn't you just say that? I call this pretentious because a mana bar is a mana bar, whatever you name it. Makes me think of those shitty Christian games where you fire truth bullets at heathens and have faith instead of health. It's still the thing you get game over to running out of, it's just instead of dying, you have to go to a state university and study engineering. And then there's the matter of Zale and Valir's childhood friend, Garl. There's a flashback where they get into trouble in a dungeon together as kids and Garl loses an eye, and that's the last they see of him before getting sealed away in the academy, and he's mysteriously absent from their graduation 10 years later. And by this point there'd been an ominous cutaway scene depicting several scheming villains wearing masks, so I figured I knew where this was going. Oh, they're gonna knock one of the masks off and it's Garl wearing an eye patch and he's all bitter at being abandoned by his friends, sword fight in the rain, lots of yelling, last episode of Cowboy Bebop, etc, etc. That's what I thought, but then 2 minutes later Garl just shows up. Hey guys, hope you had a nice decade, can I be your third party member? I made sandwiches. And then he just is. So I was a bit thrown, but over time I came to appreciate Garl, because at this point Zale and Valir are basically weirdo monks who spent their formative years locked away from society learning how to atomize monsters by doing sign language at them. And Garl is the only party member with actual personality and social skills, and it becomes a running joke how often he makes friends with the boss fights after we've duffed them up enough. He's like that one infuriating D&D player who's like an 18 charisma paladin and insists on trying to talk down every combat encounter, so the DM ends up having to keep track of 16 helper NPCs and is seriously considering committing murder-suicide using the dice bag as an improvised flail. There's even a bunch of equipable relics that act as optional easy modes, Final Fantasy XVI style, like one that automatically does the timed hits for you, or one that reduces damage, which brought on a philosophical moment. Reduce damage? That's just armor, isn't it? Is using armor playing the game on easy mode? Whence lies the border between using the standard tools the game gives you and using the baby mode workaround for crapouts? Well, I know what Ayn Rand would say if she were alive. She'd say, why am I in this coffin? It's very dark. Starfield, or to give it its full title, Starfield and Friends, is the long-awaited new action RPG by Bethesda, which by all accounts is what the lazy bastards have been making instead of the Elder Scrolls 6, or a non-shitty Fallout game. But who the hell needs those when you can have a game with a whole galaxy of explorable planets, where there could be an Elder Scrolls planet and a Fallout planet, and a littlest hobo planet and a planet made of meringue? Why not? When space exploration's on the cards, not even the sky's the limit. So, how did Starfield turn out, now we've established that it oozes potential potential like a poorly made Big Mac does Thousand Island dressing. Well, it's really bloody boring as it happens. And so as I'm searching a room for ammo, health packs and valuables, virtually every sodding random object says, "This is a crafting ingredient, don't throw this away." Crafting ingredient for what? Well, we can't just tell you. You'll have to load up your entire cocking inventory space with garbage on the off chance that some future upgrade you want will call for some of it. Ooh, I'd quite like this damage upgrade for my gun. That'll be 6 beryllium, 1 capacitor and a toast rack. Oh, just my luck, I only brought 9 chlorine, 1 fish slice and a light-emitting diode. Oh, and at some point the game said I committed a crime but wouldn't tell me what it was. I'm 60% certain I didn't, but one of the factions suddenly had a bounty on my head, and my helper NPC at the time got really pissy. I tried asking them what I'd done, but obviously the game wasn't smart enough to track that, so he could only talk around it. "Hey dude, why are you so pissed all of a sudden?" "You know perfectly well why." "I really don't, I'm trying to figure that out." "The fact you don't know is making me even madder." "I don't remember taking any flirty conversation options, why have you turned into my wife?" So then I thought I'd just dodge bounty hunters till I could reach a police station and pay the fine, but as I tried to do so, the police kidnapped me, and I woke up in a cell with a bloke saying, "We're recruiting you as an undercover agent, because the horrible crime you committed shows you're the perfect candidate to infiltrate the pirates. Could someone please explain what I nopping well did?" This isn't one of those Bloodstained or Mighty No. 9, also by the same author, stealth remake situations. The original devs aren't involved as far as I know, but the desire to be a pseudo-stealth sequel to Jet Something Radio hangs off of bum-flush Kyber junk like an infected piercing. It's got a similar visual style, i.e. like the Saturday morning cartoon version of You Got Served, and it's gone out of its way to look convincingly like a game on the Dreamcast, i.e. like a Playmobil set based on the above that got sneezed on by a coal miner, all janky animation and blurry textures. I returned to the battlefield and remembered that games about rewarding stylishness very rarely actually do. I mean, if an AI can't even point out all the squares containing traffic lights, why would you think it knows anything about style? No, the thing to do in this sort of game is figure out the one thing the game gives inordinately high points to and then do that over and over again. In the case of Bum Gush Diarrhea Bucket, your secret weapon is the corner. Yes, those innocuous seeming points where 2 grind rails meet from different angles aren't just jolly useful for pedestrian safety, they're the secret path to victory. Every time you lean into a corner while rail grinding, you add 1 to your score multiplier, and that shit mounts up. You do have to lean into it though, circumnavigate an entire food court while standing upright, boo, amateur hour, sod off back to the swing set, Tommy Pickles, do exactly the same thing while leaning slightly to the right, yay, superstar, consider yourself served, rest of universe. I admire how you don't unlock abilities, they're all available from the start and you just have to figure them out. And after I could restart the game, and when the jiggly lady in the tutorial went, "See if you can get a combo of 10, I could go, "You mean like this?" and then still be comboing into the hundreds hours later, long after her face had been fully melted off. This isn't nostalgia, I've never played Jet Set Radio and never owned a Dreamcast because... well, one hardly needs to justify that statement. I've also never put my bell end in a hole punch. I was drawn to Lies of P for 2 reasons. Firstly, the title is an anagram of Umi Piles, if you don't know what an anagram is. And secondly, it's a Bloodborne clone based on Pinocchio. And what a sentence. I mean, how do you top that? A fighting game based on Les Miserables? A top-down twin-stick shooter based on À la recherche du temps perdu? I say based on, I couldn't help thinking as I was slashing a giant mutated purple frogman to death and a snake with a spear-wielding priest on the end popped out of his bum, that events weren't quite unfolding in the spirit of the original text. Our dad's name is Geppetto, our support character is Jiminy, and the now requisite Souls-like waifu character who will level us up if we fondle her titties is the Blue Fairy. And all that's just name changes. We could have respectively named these characters Basil, Manuel, and Polly, and just as credibly argued that the game is based on faulty towers. Remember when it was a trend in the early 2000s to have token-enforced stealth sections, and they all universally sucked ass? Maybe if we hadn't been so quick to brush our teeth, designers today would still remember the taste of that ass, and actually apply the lessons of history. And while we're on the subject, maybe publishers shouldn't have forcibly removed our teeth and threatened us with prosecution if we try to continue making use of them, or try to charge us money to get an "I was very brave" sticker from the dentist. Anyway, after Mortal Kombat 11 established within canon that literally anything that happens in the story has all the permanence of a single sheet of damp bog roll after Tex-Mex night, newly deified Liu Kang was left with the job of rebuilding continuity from scratch, and so he proceeded to make one basically the same as the last, with a few token changes for the sake of change. And if this were the Saturday morning cartoon the story campaign persistently resembles, I'd assume it was trying to force parents to fork out for another round of action figures. So Baraka and Reptile are good guys now, Sub-Zero's a bastard, and the tournament between Outworld and Earthrealm is not a blood-soaked death arena, but a sort of jolly school sports day, where entrants pulverize each other's spines in the spirit of good sportsmanship. But trouble is brewing in the form of, oh, it's just Shank Bloody Sung again. This whole franchise really is just going around on a twatting carousel at this point. I won't hold back. The word that summarizes Mortal Kombat 1 in my mind is pathetic. Characters endlessly relaying their entire backstories to each other on their first meeting, and smug villains giving away all their secret evil plans to absolutely no benefit. The plot holes come so thick and fast podcast, you'd think they were trying to bait the twat who does those everything wrong with videos. I have gathered the world's greatest martial artists to represent Earthrealm in the tournament. Psych, only one of you can actually enter, but I guess the rest of you can hold his coat. Oh, Raiden, you will represent us, for you are the strongest and most honourable. Psych, none of that matters, because all your opponents are going to cheat. Here's a thing that gives you lightning powers. Bet you feel silly about all those press-ups you did. And it's Kitana I feel sorry for. With her usual role of very dutiful, reasonable outworld authority figure with cleavage you could ski down, split between her and 4 other chicks, she's left with bugger all to do all plot. Besides that, you've got the inescapable Johnny Cage, who's now living a prolonged impersonation of BoJack Horseman, and a few monsters, including a vampire lady with the voice acting of a freshman drama major reading aloud the specials at the drive-thru. Blimey, I hope whoever they got in to do her doesn't aspire to a film career. Are the mechanics much different? Oh, I don't give Metal Gear Solid the twin shits for the mechanics of fighting games, you know that. I only play Netherrealm fighters to power through the campaign on easy mode by slapping the controller on my bum, and then take the piss out of the plot. But I did note that the big new gameplay feature is the cameo system, where you are assisted during fights by another character, generally one from a previous game with even less justification for their presence than the vampire lady's voice actress at the Academy Awards. And now, inevitably, we have a new retro indie shooter that takes a very obvious and openly acknowledged influence from Max Payne, especially the self-indulgent bit, El Paso Elsewhere, designed by Zalavia Nelson, in which we play paranormal detective James Savage, voiced by Zalavia Nelson, as he bullet-time dual pistols his way through level after level of monster-haunted labyrinths to the tune of an original hip-hop soundtrack, composed and performed by Zalavia Nelson. And the plot is, James Savage has to save the world by confronting his evil blood-sucking vampire bitch of an ex-girlfriend. And if I were any of Zalavia Nelson's former partners, I'd certainly be narrowing my eyes at this point. Self-indulgent is the word of the day, and that certainly comes across over the 50-odd levels of James Savage's angsty monologuing in a voice
like a bloke with a blocked nose trying to seduce the microphone in the middle of a noisy building site.
It's one of those games that's very hard to stop playing once you start. You say, okay, I'll quit after this level because I think my kids got into the steak knives, and then 4 or 5 levels later you're like, oh well, sounds like at least one of them's still alive. And of the 2 games I want to talk about this week, it is undoubtedly the good one, although frankly that's not worth much, because the other game compares unfavourably to a Ryvita smeared with Qatar. The game is... Right, well, I have to pause things there because I had this whole review ready to go, but then a day before it was due, I was informed that the game's embargo date had changed. I didn't play any other games this week, nor do I have the time to make an entire other review, so please enjoy the scheduled review with all identifying elements removed. Why not have fun trying to guess what it is? Here's a hint, it's not Armored Core 6. A game I've been wanting to talk about because I'm pretty sure it's completely fucking terrible. It's a beat-em-up with a third-person over-the-shoulder camera, which isn't great for visibility, but is perfect if you're really curious about the contours of his bathrobe. I got through all 4 dungeons on my second go, whereupon the game went, oh no, a plot development, go through all 4 dungeons again, but slightly bigger. So I did that without a single death, and the game went, oh no, another plot development, time to take the fight to the main baddie. I don't suppose we do that by going through all 4 dungeons a third time. Hey, did you peek behind my DM screen? This time through I died once during the final boss because I committed the classic mistake of forgetting not to clip through the floor during the opening cutscene. Is the kind of bad that makes me paranoid. Like maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a checkbox in the options menu labelled remove shittiness. Maybe I didn't notice the tutorial message for the activate jetpack button. Because the alternative is that an entire studio got through the development and release of a game with a relatively well-known IP attached that presumably has its own controllers keeping an eye on things, and at no point did anyone else raise a hand and say, has anyone else noticed our game's a load of old fly-struck sheep placenta? In the last few weeks I could have been reviewing the fucking Rapture and someone in the comments would still have said, yeah, you beheld a great beast with blasphemous names on each of its 7 heads. When are you going to do Armored Core 6? Half of them going, ooh, it's by From Software and it's basically a Souls-like with giant robots, you'll love it. And the other half going, ooh, it's by From Software and it's absolutely nothing like a Souls-like, but you keep saying you're sick of them and it's got giant robots, you'll love it. But the constant requests and the brief gap in the release schedule wore me down, so I went back to AC6, that's Armored Core, not Assassin's Creed, or Animal Crossing, or Asheron's Call, or Ace Combat, or Assetto Corsa, or Astral Chain. Jesus, what is it with video games and AC? Are they trying to subliminally inform the building manager that the central heating needs fixing? Initially, the plot felt like little more than a slim excuse for making giant robots smack each other about, and there was a lot about the game I found intimidating on my first shake. Perhaps it was the first mission, in which the game goes, right, here's how you move, here's how you fire your weapons, got all that? Now kill this giant flying robot death monster that wants to destroy you with a ferocity seen only in a desperately undernourished spider trapped in a bell jar with a miniature bacon sandwich. And obviously I got stomped into a carelessly dismantled Meccano project, but over multiple attempts I felt out the workings. I soon learned that trying to be clever by hiding amid buildings, moving in out of range, etc., would result result in the boss going, interesting. Counterpoint, white-hot stream of pitiless death. But after several tries, I managed to sustain consistent damage for long enough to fill the mysterious orange bar under his health, at which point his trousers dropped around his ankles and I did some serious damage to him while I was pulling them back up. Aha! This isn't Giant Robot Dark Souls, it's Giant Robot Sekiro. Except instead of perfect parrying over and over again, you just shoot things a lot with a gun. Especially with the mission-based structuring that is always the death of pacing and flow, because the game has to stop every 5 minutes to ask permission to continue, and that tends to put me in a philosophical mood. Do I want to continue? Boy, that's a hell of a question. I mean, I'd appreciate the rest, but if I miss another Thanksgiving, I'll never hear the end of it. It is pretty fun and exciting to flit around an entire ruined city, dodging streams of explosions while keeping a bead on a target against the backdrop of a colossal industrial structure that makes you feel like an ant exploring a disused barbecue grill. And hey, 500 tanks couldn't do that, or indeed navigate the Birmingham one-way system. If you're unfamiliar with mirages, because you've never read a Tintin book or whatever, it's a phenomenon that appears in the middle of desolate wastelands which seem to be of substance, but the moment you get close enough you realise are totally ephemeral. In which case, Assassin's Creed Mirage, yes, I can see some of you are ahead of me on this one, is the most aptly subtitled entrant into the series until they bring out Assassin's Creed, another bloody boring game about stabbing. The latest Thinking Cap session has concluded that we people want the hell out of a return to basics. The prospect of maybe just not making any more Asso Credence Clearwater revivals not being conscionable apparently, but then this series has long ceased to be a collection of individual artworks and is now an underlying force of nature that ebbs into our lives now and again like the tide. His only internal struggle is that he has recurring nightmares about a monster, and he could just be eating dodgy kippers for supper. In the end, when he goes into the afore-discussed inevitable magic sci-fi room, it turns out the dreams are significant, although why wasn't entirely clear. It's something to do with memories of a past life as one of those super special before peoples Assassin's Creed likes so much, and an instance of one of the classic hackneyed surprise twists. I don't want to spoil, but it's one of the following. Someone you thought was harmless is actually the big bad, someone you thought was real is actually imaginary, or someone you thought had a vagina actually has a penis. There's a deliberate return to the Assassin's Creed basics. You infiltrate strongholds full of patrolling guards to reach objectives, no district liberating, no ship combat, none of whatever that fucking rap battle bollocks in Ascri Valhalla was supposed to be about, just the endless storybook romance between knife and random guards' throats. There's the inevitable skill tree as well, doing the usual wrong-headed thing of making the game easier and easier the more you advance in it. Here's a new upgrade that stabs 4 dudes at once while also dicing vegetables and conveniently pressing your trousers. It's like the auto-climbing hookshot from Syndicate. If you're rewarding the player by letting them not have to engage with the core gameplay as much, you're sort of telling on yourself a bit there. So what does Assassin's Creed need to do to please you, Yards? And don't say piss off and die. Yards? What? You told me not to say it. As I say, Oh No More Lords of the Fallen has almost nothing in common with its namesake, but for the fact that it's a Souls-like with a dark fantasy theme, but I repeat myself, it's got all the usual Souls-like trappings. You're an immortal dude on a pilgrimage through various doomed lands where the locals have apparently been informed that you've been shagging their collective misses, boss fights, checkpoints, free healing potion refills, elevators with buttons in the floor. But wait a sec, I tried to do that thing I always do in Dark Souls, where after using a lift I'd send it back and quickly hop off it so I don't have to wait for it next time, but I couldn't do that in Lords of the Fallen because the doors closed too quick for me to hop off. So 0 stars, better luck next time. Alright, well that summarises the one part of my notes where I wrote down bloody lifts in block capitals. Let's look at the rest. It's got an interesting suite of bespoke gimmicks to set it apart. Ammo for ranged weapons refills at checkpoints like your mana bar does, for example. And that's something in itself, a Souls-like with a viable bow build that isn't an optional challenge mode for people who pride themselves on their ability to manage the weekly shopping. But I find these days there's only one metric by which I can judge Souls-likes, and that's how long I can play them before the Souls-like fatigue sets in. And I'd say Lords of the Falling Down did quite a bit better than average. The dual world gimmick gave it a freshness, ironically, since the dead world looks like it smells like the inside of a packet of airline pretzels that was forgotten about in a seat pocket for a year, and the game doesn't seem to be doing the usual off-brand Souls-like thing of trying to outdo From Software when it comes to unreasonable difficulty, at least not where the boss fights are concerned. Very few visits from the Manus Father of the Abyss twitchy last-second lock-on spaz-out brigade that took over Elden Ring. I remember defeating this one hearty lad who was guarding the objective in the swampy area and being absolutely astonished that he didn't have a second phase, because he'd only taken like 4 goes, and I still had all my teeth. There was one particular hillside path that took me through like 5 groups of assholes, multiple of those burly shield men who all need to be carefully danced around unless you want their shields widening your bumhole by a factor of 2 feet. About 3 of that one motherfucker who was an early game boss fight who's clearly bitter about not getting a special health bar anymore, and you can't just run past them all because the path is narrow and they're a dogged bunch, especially the dogs. So it was after banging my head against that for an afternoon, only to discover it was just a shortcut that didn't even lead to progress, I soured to Lords of the Ballsack wholeheartedly. Still, it's definitely a better game than the first Lords of the Ballsack for what that's worth. Hey, we walked across a room without breaking our ankles this time. Although we did tread in the cat's litter box and punted the dog through a wall. Oh yeah, you really hate Sonic the Hedgehog, don't you, Yarts? That's why you can't keep your hands off him every time he brings a new game out, and know the complete history of the franchise and the names of all the characters, stammering, but it's not because I like you or anything. Why don't you finally stop lying to yourself, grab 2 fistfuls of blue quills, and do something that will get you thrown out of a badger watching station? Look, I can't help it if Sonic the Hedgehog makes for such an effective dance partner in the course of my usual routine of taking the piss out of shit, if you'll forgive the technical lingo. Maybe I like being around him because he reminds me of my toddler, in that he always seems to find more and more new interesting things to do with shit. They've learned enough to remove all spoken dialogue from Sonic Superstars, which was a definite step in the right direction for me, because every time Sonic opens his freakish side of the face mouth, I get mystic visions of Saved by the Bell characters sucking their own dicks so hard that spunk squirts out their tear ducts. Sonic Mania was infused with wink-wink references to the older games, but at the same time elevated the material, adding new touches, details, a complexity that wasn't possible at the time. Sonic Superstars, meanwhile, is another 2D Sonic game. 7 or 8 stages with the same themes as always. Remember when Sonic 2 had Casino Night Zone, and Sonic 3 had something similar called the Carnival Night Zone? Well, Sonic Pooper Stars has the Casino Carnival Zone, and that should clue you in as to what level of innovative spirit we're operating on here. And of the various stage-interrupting bonus rounds whose portals I keep accidentally bouncing into, it's still the more tolerable one. The one that you get at the checkpoints is a rehash of the bonus round from all the way back in Sonic 1 with the rotating background, and that music like you're being slowly dragged across broken glass by a merry-go-round. You know, the thing that was immediately dropped in the very first sequel because it killed the flow as assuredly as a hideous factory line accident. Why does this game keep giving me big coins? I wondered. They're scattered about the maps, you get them as end-level rewards, as well as if you go to the Chaos Emerald minigame twice in one stage, because God forbid we make it any easier to collect the glittery bastards. And I was suspicious because there's only a small semantic jump from big coin to premium currency. Detective Yahtzee was on the case. I quit out back to the main menu, whereupon a text box popped up saying, would you like to spend your big coins in the cosmetics shop? Oh, Detective Yahtzee does it again. Not cosmetics for Sonic and pals to use in the campaign. God no. People kick up enough of a stink if his arms are blue instead of flesh tone. No, cosmetics for your robot avatar with which you play the online battle royale mode. And oh boy, at that point my curiosity was so morbid it was selling miniature coffins outside an American elementary school. I ultimately came second in that tournament and won 8 big coins, with which I was able to buy 8/10 of one of the 2 paint colours available in the store at the time, which I could apply to precisely 1 body part. What are you selling this paint in? Yogurt pots? Oh, and when I say each match is 10 players, that's only theoretically. In almost every match I got into, it was me, 1 other player with an elaborate outfit who'd clearly played this way too much, and 8 bots. And that was the best it could do after making me wait 5 minutes for matchmaking. Apparently the game's sense of flow was still showing vague signs of brain activity, since all the established villains seem to have gone straight at the outset of 2 Spider-Mans, but trouble arises when Kraven the Hunter shows up with an army of fanatics and basically occupies the city to mount a campaign of springing supervillains and challenging them to fights to the death. Serious question, does New York City even have a police force? I remember them showing up once or twice at the ends of missions to arrest people, so I assume they're all waiting around the corner going, give it 10 minutes, Spider-Man hasn't had a personal epiphany yet. I just wonder why no one in authority is opposing Kraven at all. Hell, the flippin' TSA should have raised the alarm as he was coming through customs. Anything to declare besides the international terrorist militia, fleet of invisible attack planes, and pack of robot wolves? Oh, they give Mary Jane an instant takedown stun gun this time, but that just made me wonder why the hell the Spider-Mans have to punch a dude 15 times to get the same result. It's nothing personal, Mary Jane, it's just, have you noticed the title of the game you're in? If I play a game called Sergeant Flashy Bollocks, it's because I want to spend time only in the company of the most luminescent of testicles. Stop insisting on getting presents when it isn't your birthday party. You know what? I'm going to be a superhero fan for a second. Look at me, I like people in capes hitting each other, and choke out clouds of offended Cheeto dust whenever a black person gets cast as an established white character in a film. I'm really invested in iconic supervillains now, and I'm annoyed by the way Spider-Man 2 does them dirty. Sandman, the Lizard, and Mysterio all show up for the first time in this canon, but are all reformed. So they must have had their origin stories, got beaten up by Spider-Man, and had major character growth off-screen. And I'm like, Spider-Man alive, Spider-Man 2, you made me clean up Peter Parker's discarded Chinese takeout, but you couldn't make time for any of that. Oh, and this series is really edging the Green Goblin, isn't it? This is 2 games they've been setting him up, but at this point I don't see how he could possibly represent a raising of the stakes. They can't even play up the personal connection to Spider-Man because whoops, that's every villain. I mean, he doesn't have robot tentacles or is a literal alien invasion, he's just a buff dude who surfs, like he was bitten by a radioactive Australian.